Folks,
Perfect.
this is Book Talk with Corbin, and you know I am your host. And we have with us Dr. Wayne Winegarden. He's a senior fellow at the Pacific Research Institute. And I wanted to bring him on because he's dealing with a subject that here in my hometown, here where I'm based, Louisville, Kentucky, that we deal with a lot. Now, I don't think and I'm talking about homelessness. Now, I don't think it's as serious here as it is in places like Los Angeles, but it's still an issue we deal with. And he wrote a great book called No Way Home. And it's basically a book about homelessness. And I'm going to have him talk to you about it. Dr. Winegarden, thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Brother, I want to just start off by saying, because we don't have much time, but I want to start off by just asking, why did you write this book on homelessness?
Well, it's actually a co-authored book, and there's 4 of us in total. And I think the reason we wrote it is, being based in California, the homelessness problem is, however bad it is in Louisville or Seattle, it's worse in California. And, it's troubling, and we wanted to see how can we address it. And what we realized in terms of coming together is that it's a multidimensional problem. And so being able to have a legal scholar and a social scholar, and I'm an economist. And so we're able to bring all of these different perspectives into the problem so that we could understand the causes. And then most importantly, with that understanding, how do we get to policies that better address the issue, better help the homeless, and also kind of better the community, better the economy, all those really important social goals.
Brother, let me just step back for a second. You had said that regardless of how bad it is in some place like Seattle or Nashville or Louisville, it's worse in LA. Now, why would you say something like that? Do you have some stats to back that up?
Yeah, the percentage, California has, I think it's about 12% of the population, 27% of the unsheltered homeless, and there's a disproportionate number. But you also, beyond just that dry statistics, when you're living in San Francisco, you're living in Los Angeles, it's becoming part of your daily life where homeless encampments are taking over Venice Beach. And so it's very difficult for the community to be able to enjoy, Venice when there's so much drug use and there's so much human waste and violence tends to follow these encampments. And so all of these social issues, diseases are running rampant. I have friends in San Francisco, when they drive on the BART, right, which is the subway in San Francisco, they won't sit for fear of sitting on a used drug needle. So it's taking over life in California, and not in a good way, and not in a way where it's neither good for the homeless, nor is it good for the broader community. So it's really just, if the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, that's really what we're doing in California right now.
And brother, let me ask you this too. And, we're here in Kentucky, and we just have this image of California, and particularly LA, as, hey, it's sunny, people laid back, a lot of rich folk there, a lot of folk known all around the world. So why isn't it just a simple matter of, let's get some of these rich folks to donate some money and we build some shelters?
We're spending billions of dollars a year addressing the problem. The problem isn't the resources or the money. The problem is how you're spending it, what we're doing with the programs. There was an audit that the California auditor did of the programs, and one of his findings were, beyond just all the programs are disjointed, but they couldn't even account for how all of the money was spent, cost of just the disarray of the program. So that's a big part of the problem, is that sometimes obviously resources are important, right? You can't help people transition from the streets to kind of sustainable home without resources, but it's not all about resources. It's also about what programs you put into place, how you're trying to address the problem, right? And then just kind of your approach to it. And then there's all of these policies that doesn't seem connected to the issue, but actually are really important. And so you need to get those broader policies right, make sure the state is affordable, housing is so unaffordable in California that you're pushing people into the streets. And it's not just housing, it's cost of living, it's gas, it's energy, it's food. I mean, so you're really stressing people beyond kind of what they can handle. I think a great statistic that kind of emphasizes that, the U.S. Census, they measure how much poverty there is in the U.S.
Yes.
California is a wealthy state. And so when you look at that, there's not much poverty until you adjust for cost of living. And when they have another statistic that adjusts for cost of living, California has more poverty than any other state. More people living in poverty adjusted for cost of living and these other factors. California is worse in the country, worse than Kentucky, worse than Arkansas, Mississippi, some places you might expect it to be, but no, it's California.
Oh my Lord. Yeah, I wouldn't have guessed that. I wouldn't have guessed that,
I don't think people would, but that's what I mean. If you figure that a 6-figure salary, for most people are like, wow, if I'm making $100,000, I'm doing really well. If you're making $100,000 in San Francisco, you're barely getting by.
Lord have mercy. Yeah, that you could have stopped me on that one, brother. Yeah. If you making that kind of money here in Louisville, man, shoot, they wouldn't be talking to anybody like me. Trust me. I mean, they'd be partying all day. Right. Folks, this is Dr. Winegarden. He's one of 4 authors of the great book, No Way Home. We need to pick this book up because it's an important issue. I'm not what you might call a bleeding heart liberal, but daggone it, I'm a human being, and I hate seeing another human being live out in the streets. I mean, I really do. I really hate it, regardless of why they're out there. I just don't want to see another human being live that way. And I think this book right here, No Way Home, is going to help us better deal with that. And you say you're an economist, doctor. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
So what are, I know you could probably talk about this for hours, but what's like one policy change that you would like to see that you think would help reduce the homeless situation in California?
I'm going to cheat and I'm going to pick 2 or 3 if I can, because there's several drivers, right? We have homeless who are situationally homeless, right? Really for an economic reason, lost a job or a life event, health insurance bill, something that just pushed them over the edge. So situational homeless. We also have people who are homeless because of substance abuse issues, or homeless because of mental illness. And so first thing, when we're addressing the homeless issue, we need to think beyond just a home. And I think that's something we try to emphasize in the book, that obviously if you don't have a home, you need a place to live. But often if you don't have a holistic approach where you're addressing a substance abuse issue at the same time that you're getting someone into shelter, just getting them into a home isn't going to solve the problem because the underlying driver is still there. So from an economic perspective, I like to pick that first because, to a hammer, everything's a nail. Affordability, and I mentioned that earlier, that is key across the board. California is not unaffordable because there's something unique about where it's located or what's happening there. California is unaffordable because the policies that we've implemented drive up the cost in terms of housing. There's all sorts of environmental regulations, zoning regulations that restrict the supply, and that restricted supply is going to increase costs. And it also increases the cost of construction. It's gotten so bad, and I think this statistic says it all. In Los Angeles, the cost to build an affordable housing unit, so what the government deems as an affordable housing unit, that cost is actually higher than the cost of the average housing unit. You need to spend more to make an affordable housing than it actually costs for housing. And that obviously it shows the insanity of all the regulations around affordable housing, but I think it also demonstrates that because of all of these regulations, we've driven up the cost of construction, the time delays of construction, prevented duplexes and triplexes from being on property that can get more housing units onto the market, that we're forcing up costs, and it's to the detriment. All these policies tend to hurt those with least income the most, and that's exactly what we're seeing. So you push people to the edge, you have an adverse life event, things spiral out of control. and you lose your home. Right? So we need to fix that. We need to make things more affordable. For the actual situational homeless, there are great programs. There's a program out of Virginia called Shelters to Shutters. And what they focus on is getting somebody a job as well as getting them into housing. So they partner with businesses. It's a private nonprofit. They partner with different businesses to help address the root cause of your situationally homeless. Get you a job, get you kind of ability to kind of sustain yourself or your family, as well as getting you a home. And so those are great programs, and we need to think holistically along those lines. For people who are struggling with substance abuse, we need the same type of incentives. And there's a great program in Tennessee where they actually use, they're like day centers, day beds, where if you're homeless, you can come and you get bag storage and shower and charge up your phone. So it's creating a positive incentive for someone who's homeless to come in, and while they're there, you can take the opportunity to assess their needs. And if they have substance abuse issues and they're willing to go into treatment, so we're creating an opportunity to interact in a positive way. Again, a private nonprofit. And one of the things we recommend is California and all states should rely on these private nonprofits to a greater extent for services. They're more innovative, flexible, they're able to tailor in this way. And so relying on these private nonprofits to provide those services. And then we need to also change the laws that are making it easier for someone with substance abuse to remain on the streets. Sometimes you don't realize the problems and you need that negative incentive. And several of the things, if you want, we can go into detail, but for our non-Californians, it might be too kind of in the weeds. But basically, we're doing things that make it easier for somebody who has substance abuse issues to kind of maintain that lifestyle on the street. And then when you combine that with court rulings that are creating a right to live on the street, so the government can't enforce vagrancy laws. It's not exactly what it says, but that's the practical result. And that's one of the things we go into detail in the book about, is how the legal environment has changed and swung, where we would go all the way back to colonial times, where it was way too far that side, where you just run somebody who's homeless, you just run them out of town. Well, obviously that's horrific. But we've swung to this point where there's a right to live on the street. That creates all sorts of problems for the community, but it also it is enabling a destructive lifestyle that leads to these problems of disease. I mean, we have typhus, which is like a medieval disease, right? Typhus on the streets, and it's not just a community health threat, which it is, and it's not just a community kind of reduction in quality of life. In San Francisco, you have to walk over human waste and drug needles to get anywhere. I mean, so that it's just awful. But also, this is not a humane way to help someone with substance abuse issues or with mental health problems, because you're living in a disease-ridden environment where there's violence, there's just a lack of opportunity. So this is not, and that's one of the kind of our points. This is not a humane way to deal with the situation. This is not an alternative lifestyle. This is something that, we need to help the people who are like this, but this is not something that we should be condoning in the sense of, well, they just live on the street. No, that's unacceptable.
Brother, you just said a lot. A lot, man. And some of the things you said, it just never occurred to me. Here in Louisville, we almost, I want to say weekly hear something, and so I just sort of had this impression, just open up more shelters, throw more money. Why aren't you doing that? And then there were some people who were saying, well, they have the right. They brought that up. They have the right to be out there. We shouldn't move their encampments and all. But, listening to somebody like you, and when you put it in a bigger perspective, you begin to realize, hey, wait a minute, that might not be the best way to approach things. But I think the bigger issue here is we need to hear from people like you. We're not hearing, I guess I might say, different voices on this subject. And that's the importance, talking to my listeners, of this book, No Way Home. You're hearing different perspectives, different ideas, and we really have to take these ideas, understand them, and talk about this, because whether it be Louisville or whether it be Los Angeles, we just have to do something, have to do something different, because right now the situation is not working. And brother, I was also interested in saying that in listening to you, you really didn't have a whole lot of emphasis on, well, the government needs to give more money, or the government needs to do this, or the government needs to do that. Is that deliberate on your part, or what?
Well, the government is already, not even counting local encounters, things of that nature. I mean, the government's already, over the past 3 years, I'm doing this from memory, but I'm pretty certain it's correct. We're spending about $30,000 per homeless person on all the different programs. So resources are necessary, undoubtedly. San Francisco alone is spending over $100 million simply cleaning up the streets. And this is just mopping up the problem. This is not resolving the problem. So there are a lot of resources that are already being spent. The private nonprofits, and that's why, again, we emphasize that so much, they find ways to do this much more cost effectively. So it's not a matter of additional resources. Obviously, resources are necessary. It's that, how you spend the money is just as important, if not more so. Certainly at this point, because we're not spending it well. Whenever you have an auditor from the state that comes in and that says, you can't track how you're spending the money, we don't know how these all programs are coordinating. There's all sorts of again, we're not talking about intentions yet. The intentions, I think, are really, are there to try and to help. But we need to judge policies on their outcomes, not on their intentions. And the outcome is that this problem in California is getting worse and worse and worse. And if you go back over time, California, after the housing bubble, right? Mm-hmm. Homelessness was high across the country, and it started going down. It went down in California and went down nationally. But in 2014, California started going on this sustained rise, which has been going up ever since through 2020, going up, whereas the rest of the country has gone down and then it's kind of flattened out in the past couple of years. So that's something disconcerting, but it's certainly very different from what we've seen in California. And that's the exact same time when we saw housing affordability decline. We saw these social policy changes that have enabled people to, in effect, gain this right to live on the street and change policies that provide a means for them to survive on the street. So we're, in effect, enabling that destructive lifestyle. Those changes happened right around the same time that California started going up in terms of the number of homelessness, and the rest of the country was going down. And that's just not a mere coincidence. So it's policies that matter. It's how we spend it, and it's kind of what we do that really matters.
Brother, we're going to conclude on that note. And again, I want to keep emphasizing to people, this is a very important book. You need to get it, whether you live in California or not. If you just, if you're just a human being, you have any ounce of compassion in you, we need to really get into this, buy this book, get into this book and discuss it. Because as the doctor said, good intentions are fine, but we also need to be making sure that what we're doing is producing the results that we want, or producing effective results. Doctor, where can we get your book?
I was about to do a shameless plug, so thank you. Yes, it's available at Amazon.com or wherever Barnes and Nobles, wherever you would buy a book, it's available there.
Okay. And do you have a personal website?
PacificResearch.org. We have research on homelessness, but a whole host of issues: fiscal policy, education policy, health policy. We also have a great blog, Right by the Bay. All that's available on PacificResearch.org. I urge anyone who's interested in these issues to go visit.
And if they wanted to donate to your institute, they can do that there.
Absolutely.
All right. Brother, thank you so much. I will be in touch, and I appreciate your time today.